I'm at the NASDAQ building in New York, and I'm with Professor Bharat Anand. And it's a great delight for me to be talking about this new book that has just been released today, as a matter of fact. It's called The Content Trap by Professor Bharat Anand from Harvard Business School. And the subtitle says, A Strategist's Guide to Digital Change. And Professor Anand is the Henry Byers Professor of Business Administration at Harvard Business School. He graduated magna cum laude with a BA in economics from Harvard University, received his PhD in economics from Princeton University. And I see that you're all coming on. Thanks for coming on. You see all those comments, Bharat, already. So I want to get straight to this book. It's called The Content Trap, and it's about, in a way, the future of digital strategy and marketing as well. And the first thing I want to ask you is, why this book? How come you wrote this book?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Deepak. So we're hearing this term digital everywhere today, right? We're hearing about it in retail, in banking, in education. This is digital. And part of the premise of the book is that many sectors are actually going through digital transformation today. Turns out there's one part of the economy, media, entertainment, related industries, which have been experiencing this for 25 years. And so the question is, what can we learn from the history of change in that part of the world, which might inform digital efforts elsewhere?
So how come you wrote this book? What was the motivation in writing this book?
So I've been really a student of digital change in the media for about 15 to 20 years now. And about a decade ago, we write cases at Harvard Business School, and their stories. And we were listening to these stories, we're discussing these stories, and about a decade ago, a colleague of mine, Felix Oberholzer, and I created a program for senior managers of companies in the media, just trying to make sense of what's happening with digital change. And the main reaction we got after that program was, where can we read more? And that sort of really was the trigger behind the thought of writing this book.
So, I've spent my entire life creating content. I mean, people watch me, and we have lots of friends. I can see that you're posting comments, and we'll read your comments later. But everybody that comes along in my ecosystem, I think they come for the content. Are you saying I'm dead? I mean, I'm no longer relevant if all I do is produce content?
I mean, you're clearly not dead. I think that will also violate your own theories of infinite possibilities. We never die.
But I focus on content.
Yeah, but
and you say it's a trap. So,
yeah, so I think
you're in a trap.
So I think you're doing something different, which is just a step back. So I think this idea of content as king was a very powerful axiom 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the way we framed it has changed over time. Content is king, content versus distribution. Really, I think where I'm trying to shine the spotlight is on something else which is fundamental about digital worlds, which is connections.
We're all connected now, globally. By the way, I'm watching people from all over the world right now. We have comments coming in from the whole globe, actually. So
in some sense, one question is, why aren't we having this conversation in a traditional TV studio? I think that really speaks to the premise of the book, which is, with Facebook Live, you can have interaction, you can have conversation with people all over. So in a sense, the content trap, as I think about it, is a mindset. It's a mindset where companies, individuals, entrepreneurs, content creators often seem to follow seemingly rational behaviors, which turn out to be flawed oftentimes. And there are three behaviors in particular that I focus on in the book. The first is this idea that in a world of clutter, the only way out is to produce better and better product. So that's the first trap. The second is, let's focus all our energies on extracting value, the last piece of juice, out of the existing product or content we offer. And the third is, we're all trying to figure out what works. Let's look at companies or others like us in the content business see what works, and embrace it immediately. Those are the three manifestations of what I call the content trap. And I think they're all missing something fundamental, which is this idea of connections.
And so, what do you mean by connections? We're connected right now, right?
Yeah. So in some sense, think about creating content. I think part of the premise there is not just creating content, but creating content to connect people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is that interesting? Think about the newspaper industry. The traditional narrative is that the internet destroys newspapers because online news is so much better. It's faster, cheaper, real time than traditional news. If you turn out to look at circulation per household for newspapers, it's been declining for the last 20 years. It turns out that decline has been happening for 60 years. So you literally cannot distinguish the impact of the internet from what came before: radio, TV, 24/7 cable news.
But I get my news on.
Yeah, we get it mostly on digital
news
now. But if you look at circulation per household, it literally just follows a straight line. Now, why is that interesting? As we know, the internet did impact newspapers, but it impacted the part of newspapers called classifieds, right, where we post job listings, cars. That accounts for about 40% of the revenues, matrimonials in many parts of the world. That accounts for over half the profits of many newspapers. Now, that's what I call a connected product. Why? Because we go to the classified site where there's the most listings. Advertisers go where there's the most buyers. You have these feedback loops. When you win the feedback loops, you win big. When you lose the entire business. And that's what went to the internet through Craigslist and Monster and Trader.
So, what are people doing wrong? They're doing the thing, focusing on content, competing on content, trying to improve the content, get the best out of the content.
Yeah, so ironically, the best product or the best content can often lose in digital worlds. I mean, the canonical example is Apple competing with Microsoft in the personal computer industry for 30 years. Most people, I think, would argue it was a better product, and it ends up with 3% market share. Now, why is that? Oh, the PC standard was open, and it was created to connect people. Apple, a closed system. We see this everywhere, right? We're on Facebook now. It's a nice product. When Google Plus comes out, some people thought it's actually a nicer product because you have circles of friends, you have privacy controls, and guess what? It goes nowhere. Someone actually said, it feels like I'm the only person playing in the sandbox. We see this with classifieds. Craigslist is dominant. It's not a beautiful product by any stretch of the imagination, but it wins the network. VHS Betamax, you see this time and time again.
So I'm an entrepreneur. A lot of people watching us are entrepreneurs. They don't want to be marginalized as they move into the digital age. What should they be focusing on?
Yeah, so content obviously is always going to be important. But the question is, can you do something to try and connect people in the process of content creation? And we see this everywhere, right? I mean, the proof is in the pudding. $2 trillion of market value now created by essentially 6 to 9 companies over the last 15 years. They're all playing in the content space. But it's connecting first and then creating content or generating content. As opposed
content
to the
always in context with what's going on in the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, so that's
what's the zeitgeist at the moment.
So it's very interesting. I mean, again, the narrative about another part of the sector, which is music. We saw CD sales decline over the last 20 years. The decline coincided with the rise of Napster. And so the narrative is piracy killed the music industry. Oh, it turns out there was another explanation, which is we're simply experiencing a format change to digital formats. By the way, if that story were true, we can see how fast the decline was in earlier format changes. And if you look at the transition from vinyl to cassette to CDs, you see almost exactly the same rate of decline. Now, if you think that the problem is piracy, that leads you to one set of strategic decisions. If you think it's about simply a format change, the question is, how can I create value? How can I capture value in this new part of the ecosystem? What's interesting about music is just as CD sales were declining, we had an explosion in demand for broadband access. We had an explosion in MP3 players. Think about how much we spent on the iPod. And what's more interesting is concert prices, live events, have exploded. So there's a study by Alan Kruger at Princeton where he showed that the price of live concerts more or less tracks the rate of inflation till the mid-90s. After you see file sharing, the price of live events explodes. So 30 years ago, essentially concerts were the advertisement for you to buy the CD. Now that relationship is flipped. Free music, the advertisement for you to go to the concert. If we define our business as content, as the CD business, yeah, you're doomed. Uh, if you think more broadly, in this case, about product connections, um, there seem to be huge opportunities for value migration and value capture elsewhere.
So I'm speaking to Professor Bharat Anand from Harvard Business School. His new book is called The Content Trap, a strategist guide to digital change. And recently you've started online education from Harvard Business School. How's that working out?
So it's very interesting. So in some sense, I was pulled into this effort 3 years ago as I started writing this book. And what we do is case method teaching. We have interactive teaching at Harvard Business School. So we try and get students involved. 3 months into the effort, I had a few MBA students working with us, and they kept saying, we don't just learn from the faculty in the classroom, we learn from each other. We learn in study groups, we learn in the corridors at lunch. And this was a big realization. Perversely, I think we were falling into the content trap. We're trying to make the best platforms, the best content. We shifted the effort to really think about connecting the learners, social learning, as we now call it, change the platform, change the incentives. It's ended up being a major differentiator, I think, for us. Part of what we're trying to do is take the classroom experience and rather than look at online as a threat that might somehow destroy what we do in the classroom, which we never believe is the case. How can we take the principles of great pedagogy, but really think about the opportunities with digital technology and reimagine this? So it's a philosophy that we now hear about companies trying to embrace. It's what I call forget and borrow. And this idea actually goes back to, in fact, other scholars and companies that have embraced this. We're trying to forget certain habits that constrain us in terms of what we think teaching looks like. But at the same time, of course, we're trying to borrow certain principles of what great teaching is in the digital world. So we're in the early stages. It's been very interesting because we create these courses now, and the students more or less interact with each other. They're answering each other's questions almost perfectly, accurately, precisely.
Learning from each other.
Whether it's very humbling, they don't need us. But it also gives us an opportunity to think about what learning looks like. Now, when you think about this, learning has always been social. That's why we went to schools and hung out with each other. It's something we're sort of discovering in the online world.
So Bharat, why should I buy this book, or why should anyone buy it, and why should anyone read it?
Yeah.
The Content Trap, if one is getting into business, digital business, marketing, what's the reason? How does one benefit?
So we started this really as, I wrote this book really thinking about the perspective of senior executives. This was about 10 years ago in traditional media companies. How can they make the transition? It turns out the ideas and the traps, these behaviors, in fact, seem to characterize middle managers, middle market companies, entrepreneurs, content creators. Most of them don't come to Harvard Business School. And so in some sense, this is really an effort to reach out and take the ideas that we normally teach on campus, but extend it.
So if you're not planning to go to Harvard Business School, but want to get the best knowledge, wisdom, information that is being offered in this whole world of digital marketing, then I would suggest you buy this book. I've been reading it and I haven't been able to put it down. We're at NASDAQ. The book was actually on the screen at the NASDAQ tower right here in Times Square. And as you know, we've been interacting with all of you, doing webinars and seminars online, even teacher training online. And this is going to get even more interesting as we move into the worlds of holography, augmented reality, immersive experiences. It's a new age. I remember when I came to the United States, there was no television in India. I had never seen a television. Then the fax machines, then the internet, and now email and everything, Twitter, Facebook. We're living in a connected world and we influence each other, we learn from each other. I'm grateful to have you as the audience and interact with you. I will look at all your questions later. Somebody is asking, how can they get a signed book? Well, I don't know about that. Or maybe, we can email a digital book or a cover, and we can figure out how to get a signed book. Let me see what else. Um,
Send Deepak your address. I'll be glad to send a signed booklet.
okay, so people say they love learning. They're very interested in learning online. And somebody says, can it benefit a real estate agent? That's an interesting question.
So that's very interesting, right? Again, when we think about real estate brokers, we 15 years ago we tended to frame online technologies as basically destroying real estate agents. Um, what's interesting is how this whole business has evolved. So now we see brokers actually embracing these technologies and saying, oh, when it comes to listings, as opposed to simply writing 3 lines of what the house is about in the newspaper, we can show you videos. We can give you a tour. It actually enhances the experience. And then the value of the broker actually becomes something very different.